On this week's edition of Raw in Indianapolis, we got the follow-up to the Wyatt Sicks angle last week, and more specifically, we got the follow-up to the world of Uncle Howdy, because we did get the interview with Uncle Howdy and Taylor Rotunda / Bo Dallas on this episode of the show, and it is one that's being talked about a lot. And it all kind of led to that point after we saw Sister Abigail crawling through the ring as Chad Gable was out there. He got out, and then she goes over and hands Michael Cole this mysterious package, and Cole would later reveal that it was a VHS tape. And once they played the tape, it was this very interesting interview between Uncle Howdy and Taylor Rotunda. And even someone like myself, who is an old school wrestling fan, I can tell you that there's a lot of things I enjoy about wrestling when it comes to like title importance, heat spots in matches, all this other stuff, right? But I can also appreciate why they're doing what they're doing with this, because as I said after the debut angle last week, it was all going to be about how you follow this up and how you make people care and be just as invested moving forward as they are, right from the debut, right? And a lot of people got interested after that because it was something that was so unusual in WWE to see visually everything that happened on last week's Raw. But how do you get people to actually care moving forward and get them invested in the story that you're telling? That is always the difficult part. If you were someone that did not like last week's angle, you may not have even thought this was anything more than just your basic, kind of Bray Wyatt world type interview segment here that maybe you were not able to get invested in. But if you were someone who did have an open mind after last week and say, you know what, I'm going to see where this goes, I don't know how you could probably view this as anything other than a huge, huge success, because they addressed so many different things in this however many minute-long interview this was, that made you even more, I think, invested in this world, and even more invested now in Taylor Rotunda and what he is trying to achieve by doing this. And I think that was the big thing right from the start in this, was that they directly went at all the critics everyone, that's in that group of people who said they're just doing this to exploit, the Bray Wyatt, his passing, all this other stuff. That's all they're doing. They directly addressed that right from the beginning, and that pause you got when that question was asked, right from Uncle Howdy to Taylor Rotunda, that pause as if to say, I'm about to basically unleash what is really going on and all the emotions of why we're doing this. And that, to me, is what made this work so well. Is, like I said, it's really about giving me a reason to believe in your journey. Why are you doing this? What is sort of led you here? What is the motivation behind it? We all know the story, right? If we're watching Raw, we've seen Bray Wyatt before. We know what his story was. And we know that whenever he passed away, we know all the emotions that came out from everyone that was around him, family, friends, all of that. And we know that we also saw, if you watched it on Peacock, which I would highly suggest if you haven't already, on Peacock Network, whatever, the Bray Wyatt Becoming Immortal documentary. So well done. I did a review of it on here on the channel. You can find it, search for it, watch my thoughts on it. But you could see all the emotion behind Taylor Rotunda and everything that came out of him in wanting to find a way to keep his brother's legacy going. And that was really what this was about. Now, it was done within the setting of this, right? And that's where they added the major detail at the end, which I thought was so fascinating. If you caught it, you kind of see the way I had it, on the thumbnail of this video. You can see that they're recording this interview. This interview was done within the Firefly Funhouse. You can see the outline of the door. As, at the end of the interview, you can kind of see how they, the camera goes in a little bit, and you can see that there's the door handle there. It's the Firefly Funhouse. And, we kind of know what that meant for Bray Wyatt. And everyone's talked about, within the mind and all this other stuff, and was it real? All those questions. But it really goes a bit deeper than that, because it was also about just the words that came out of Taylor Rotunda here and how it was delivered so effectively, the timing, the delivery of everything. But that's secondary when you think about this. It's really just about the why, right? It's all about why is he doing this? And some of the lines that were delivered here were so impactful in terms of why he is actually doing this. And the level of detail that was involved in something like this and the way they were able to address everything in just such a short amount of time, I thought was just tremendous, because it does give you now reason to understand, hey, I want to see where they go next. I want to see what they can achieve, knowing the reason behind it, right? And I think when you see some of the different things that were said within this segment, right, you can go to a lot of different things. And again, you can just see it on his face as he's talking about what his brother meant to him. And the question that could just, there were multiple questions here that could just rock you if you're just watching this casually, and then, you're like, all right, I'm going to see what this is about. But some of the questions that are asked: how did it feel when your brother died? It's like, okay, let's sit back for a second. And you kind of saw it. There's a little bit of a hesitation there. And then all the emotion just starts coming out, right? And his response was, like, the most important thing in my life was taken away from me, right? And so people who have been in that position before, people who have felt that pain before, they can resonate with that. They can understand how it feels to be in that spot and know that you want to now find a way to sort of take that emotion, turn it into something to where you're honoring your brother's legacy. That's what he's trying to do, and that was made very clear in this segment. And like I said, the attention to detail here, even the detail of having it inside the Firefly Funhouse, there's so much that adds to this story now moving forward. And I think specifically he went into talking about, hey, the reason we came to WWE is that we wanted to rule the world together, right? I think he was saying we were going to rule the world together. We had made it, and we had it. We had everything we wanted. But then it was all taken away from me. And again, that is the level of emotion that you do not get with every single story in WWE, right? Because it just doesn't exist in some of the other things. This is a completely unique scenario. And I think that's why, for me, again, even as an old school wrestling fan, this is not something I'm used to seeing. This is something that's completely different than everything else that I'm used to. But you can hook me with a great story. You can hook me with this kind of emotion, because now, like I said, it's so much easier to just be so invested in what they're trying to do. And look, at some point, yes, they're going to have to get in the ring, right? At some point, you have to see what are the next steps. They're going to have to wrestle. This group has to be in a wrestling capacity within a professional wrestling company. That's what probably has to happen at some point. We all agree on that. But if you continue to build up this backstory the way that they've done it to this point, and you can kind of see that they're hitting all the right notes so far. And I know it's so far it's only 2 weeks. I get it. But I don't think there's a reason for me at this point, after that incredible segment, to see the emotion and everything involved. That felt real. And I know it's okay, that felt real within the world of a VHS tape or something that we know was recorded. It's not just, an actual interview. You've got a character, Uncle Howdy. You've got a real person on the other side. But that's kind of the story, right? That's the storytelling, is that you kind of have someone who is battling with all these different things, all these different demons, and everything that comes from the passing of the person that you loved the most. And that's what he said. Bray was the most important thing in his life, and it was taken away from him just when they finally had what they wanted. That is a story that I am willing to go on this journey and to try to figure out, okay, how does this person ultimately overcome all of this, right? All the obstacles, everything. How does he get past this? And maybe this is the way. And you know what? I think it's been great so far. Professional wrestling has something for everyone. And even if there are people that are just not ever going to be as invested as they would be if it was just, like I said, a traditional professional wrestling match or those kind of things, I get it. But I tell you, if you like a good story, if you enjoy and appreciate the detail of storytelling and things that really, when you put it all together, you see all the little tiny things. And remember, we've always talked about this with Triple H. That's one of the things he's done the best, is add all the little tiny details. But this isn't just Triple H, right? This is the working of Taylor Rotunda, who's trying to keep his brother's legacy going, and other people I know as well that are playing a huge role in how they're telling the story of the Wyatt Sicks. And I thought this was just, again, so well executed. And we'll see how they continue to follow up with it, because that's all that matters. What comes next, and how do you keep people hooked week after week after week with something that is very unique on a professional wrestling program? But so far, a couple weeks in, I think they've done a great job. And to me, this was the shining moment of everything that had built to this point, because you finally were able to get that just raw, emotional sort of, reveal. And even though we knew that, to actually see that within this world, the way they're presenting this group, I thought was just, again, about as good as it gets. And I would highly recommend go back and watch this thing if you can or want to, because there were a lot of, like I mentioned, just sort of the detail added, I thought really brought this to life. It made this feel real, because it was real emotion. And, that's the thing, is like, how do you blur the lines between what's real and what's not real on a scripted professional wrestling show? I mean, this was kind of the best of both worlds, because you got everything you could have wanted. You got the real emotion behind it, knowing the story, knowing the backstory of this entire thing. And you got you would have to say, I think to this point, that was probably the best performance that probably Taylor Rotunda has ever given on screen. And I hate to call it a performance, because it seemed like it was just someone, letting their emotions out. And that is why it worked so well, is because what they're trying to achieve. They want to honor Bray Wyatt the best way they can. And if that is the goal, which is very clear at this point, they did that here, because this was fantastic. So you guys let me know what you thought of this interview with Uncle Howdy and Taylor Rotunda, and all the emotions behind it. Always enjoy the discussion. Let me know what you guys thought. As always, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out. And again, let me know your thoughts on this, just what I thought was a pretty incredible segment with Uncle Howdy and Taylor Rotunda.